So we kick off promptly at 2 because I know and time is precious. So just to introduce myself, my name is Caoimhe Ní Riagáin and I'm the head of investment services at the Arts Council. Some of you will know me. So just to welcome you all to this webinar on strategic funding. So it's an overview of the strategic funding scheme for 2024, where in particular I want to highlight the main changes to the scheme, just to take you through the key elements of the guidelines. And also, I suppose we asked for questions in advance. We've got a couple of questions in, which I will come to at the end of the session. If you do have questions, we have muted you and your cameras are off at the moment. So we would ask that you put questions in the chat and I will come to them at the end of the session. If there is anything I can't answer or that I need further advice on, I will come back to you all in an email after the session. But if questions come to you as I'm presenting, just pop them in the chat and I will come to them at the end. And I have a couple of colleagues here with me to help me along with the questions so that I keep track of everything. Okay, so today we're going to look at the purpose of strategic funding. We'll talk about who can apply and who can't apply. We look at the mandatory documentation that we request for strategic funding. We will look at the main changes to the guidance documents since 2023. There's a change to access costs that I want to take you through. We'll look at key dates and then I will take questions at the end. So many of you in the call will be very familiar with the strategic funding guidelines, but I'm still going to recap on what the purpose of the scheme is. So the purpose of strategic funding is to invest in and support the organisations needed to lead, sustain and develop the arts in Ireland. Organisations that receive strategic funding must play a critical part in delivering the policy priorities of making great art work, the Arts Council's 10-year strategy. Strategic funding is intended to support both the operating core costs of organisations and the activities that your organisation undertakes to deliver your mission. So who can apply? So to be eligible for strategic funding, your organisation must be formally constituted as either a company limited by guarantee or a designated activity company or a statutory body. You must apply in your own name and not in the name of another company or individual. And you must have previously successfully applied for Arts Council funding, either in the name of your organisation or in the name of a key person involved in the organisation. Organisations not formally constituted as either a CLG or a DAC may apply on the understanding that they will commit to formally incorporating in this way should their application for strategic funding be successful. You cannot apply. So if you've applied for funding through the Arts Grant Funding Scheme in 2024 or through the Festival Investment Scheme in 2024, you cannot apply for strategic funding in 2024. Members of the Council of National Cultural Institutions, directly funded by the Department of Tourism, Culture, Arts, Gaeltacht, Sports and Media, cannot apply. First-time applicants, and this is important to note because I do think we have a few organisations on the call who haven't previously applied to strategic funding. If it is the first time your organisation has applied for strategic funding, you must discuss this with the relevant arts team before applying. If we receive an application from an organisation that has not had a conversation with the relevant arts team, you will be considered to be ineligible. Organisations that fail to meet the eligibility criteria will not be assessed and will not receive strategic funding. So the main change is what we've done. We've tightened language in certain sections. We've put in a section on climate policy, on the EDI policy and access costs. They're fairly minor changes since last year. Just to talk about a couple of more minor changes, all supporting material must be uploaded as part of your application by no later than the deadline date. Failure to observe this may lead to disqualification and may impact your overall assessment score. I suppose I'm just calling that out because some organisations did miss the deadline date last year. And we just really want to reinforce that you should have everything in by the deadline date. And just to note that there may be impacts on your overall score should you fail to adhere to the deadline. So just please keep that in mind. Some changes to the decision making. The Arts Council, the council themselves consider recommendations and makes final decisions for all amounts above 50,000. The Arts Council executive considers recommendations and makes final decisions for all amounts of less than 50,000. So just to touch briefly on the mandatory documentation. For those applicants currently in receipt of strategic funding, you must submit a completed AAR, Arts Activity Report for 2022. You must submit your audited accounts for your most recent financial year. If you've already supplied this information to the Arts Council, and many of you may have, you do not need to do so again. Then other mandatory supporting materials for all applicants. So you need to complete your AAR template that includes activities for 2023, year to date and projected to year end, and planned activities for 2024. The guidelines provide a lot more information on filling that out. If you have any specific questions, you can come back to either myself or the arts teams after this call and we'll answer any specific questions you have. You need to supply copies of your organisation's management accounts for 2023 and 2024. You should show your financial performance to date for 2023 and your forecast for 2024, each provided in the same format. If audited accounts are available for 2023, please provide these. You must provide detailed budgets relating to your planned activities. These are in addition to the information in the AAR template. For these, you have the option to use the activity budget template provided by the Arts Council. Note that these budgets must clearly set out fees to artists and other freelance arts professionals. So if this is relevant to your application, if it's relevant, provide any evidence of any confirmed financial support, sponsorship or partnership from other organisations or entities that you refer to within your application. Provide any evidence of any confirmed memorandums of understandings, financial or partnership agreements that you have in place around touring, co-productions or other activities involving third parties that you refer to in your application. If your proposal involves working with vulnerable people, you must submit an acknowledgement that you adhere to the national policy and procedures on safeguarding vulnerable persons at risk of abuse. And if your proposal involves working with animals, you must provide a copy of your animal welfare protection policies and procedures. So just to note on our climate action policy, there is nothing to do for this for 2024 round of strategic funding, but we do want to bring your attention to it. So we will publish our climate action and environmental policy later in 2023. Organisation awarded strategic funding for 2024 will be required to develop their environmental commitment and reporting during 2024. To support organisations in this process, we will offer training and other resources in 2024. Having an organisational climate policy which demonstrates environmental commitment and reporting will become a condition of funding in 2025. You won't be scored on it, it will be a condition of funding from 2025. In terms of the EDI policy and action plan, we had asked all strategically funded organisations in 2023 to commit to providing an EDI policy. So in this round of guidelines, we have gone a little bit further. So by 2024, all strategically funded organisations should have a published, publicly available EDI policy with key actions as detailed in the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Toolkit. If you do not have a published, publicly available EDI policy with key actions, it will be a condition of your funding to have this in place by no later than the 30th of June 2024. By 2025, all strategically funded organisations should have a full, published, publicly available EDI action plan to support their EDI policies. If you do not have a published, publicly available EDI action plan, it will be a condition of your funding to have this in place no later than 30th of June 2025. Failure to comply with these EDI requirements will impact your EDI score negatively in the future, which will impact your overall score. So please note that in your application for 2024 for round of funding. So access costs. So what we've done in this round of guidance is we've clarified the distinction between access costs required to make work accessible, which should form part of your overall request, and extra access costs that may be required for you or anyone directly involved in shaping your work creatively. So in that context, we've narrowed the definition of a participant slightly. In the context of strategic funding, the Arts Council defines participants as those who express themselves creatively by taking part in artistic activities. So last year you would have seen an additional line that included the broader context of audience in the definition of the participant. For example, someone reading a book, watching a performance, etc. If your application is successful and we award you funding, you may need extra access costs for you or anyone directly involved in shaping your work creatively. Therefore, in addition to the maximum amount permitted, the Arts Council will also consider access costs specifically relating to the making of work by artists or participants with disabilities. However, if you are including activities that you need to make your activity accessible to a wide range of people, including audiences with access needs, this should be included in your activity budget. For example, having an ISL interpreter for your event or performance, using an audio description service, or making your website compatible with screen readers. They're examples of activities that should be included in your activity budget in order to make your activity accessible. Key dates: it's now opened on the 27th of June, it closes on the 7th of December. The decisions will issue in the third week in December. We've asked for questions in advance. I've received 2 questions. So I'll just go through those now. Can we use strategic funding to build reserves? So that's an interesting question. So it's not called out in the guidelines. Strategic funding is there to cover core costs, as well as the activities that the organisation will undertake. But we do expect organisations to have a reserve policy. So it is possible that you shouldn't be using strategic funding specifically to build reserves, but you should be mindful in how you're running your organisation that, you know, a reserve policy is something that we consider to be good governance, and that generally the guidance we give is around 3 to 6 months of that. But can come back to us with any further information, any further questions on that. Will music applicants have eyes on the new music policy ahead of the application deadline, and will that policy affect application assessment? The answer to that is no, you won't. We hope to publish the music policy in autumn. It won't have any impact on the strategic funding assessment for 2024, and we should have a clearer date on that by the end of the summer. So I'm going to open it up. Thank you for coming in today, and I'm going to open it up to questions now, which you can put in the chat.